Yu Yu Hakusho, the live action from Netflix. It just came out today at the time of this recording. At the time this video comes out, it's been out for a couple days. And like every series that I do, I'm going to do a review for every episode, and I'm going to be doing blind reviews. So I've only watched episode 1. You're going to get a review of episode 1. I haven't watched episode 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 yet. That way I can review each episode as it stands on its own, rather than how it goes overall. And before we get into it, I'm just going to talk a little bit about who's behind this. So Robot Communications is the one that's working on this. It's developing this series. It's a Japanese company. They've worked on a lot of stuff like Parasite Eve, the 1997 movie. Some of their somewhat more recent stuff would be Parasite Part 1 and Part 2, which came out in the mid-2010s. They also worked on Terraformers. They've worked on Alice in Borderland, which a lot of people are you probably familiar with. And they also worked on the special effects for Godzilla Minus One, which has been getting a lot of critical acclaim. So yeah, not a bad company to be working on this series. The director for the series is Sho Tsukikawa. I am not familiar with any of the stuff that he's worked on. We got 2 writers for the series. We got Tatsuro Mishima, whose only claim to fame is actually this series. It's Yu Yu Hakusho and Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead, the live action. And the other writer is Yoshihiro Togashi, who is actually well known for doing a lot of Yu Yu Hakusho stuff. He's worked on the TV series, the OVAs, the video games of Yu Yu Hakusho, as well as Hunter x Hunter, or Hunter x Hunter, however you want to pronounce it. I always pronounce the X when it comes to stuff like that, like Hunter x Hunter, Spy X Family. Some people don't, but whatever. So those are the people that are behind this series. And let's just jump right in. We're going to be going through the entire episode, so there will be spoilers. So we start off this episode with Yusuke Urameshi already dead. We just see his ghost staring at his dead body as it's being loaded up into the back of an ambulance. And I was like, okay, this is a pretty good way to start it. I was a little bit worried that we weren't going to see Yusuke like how he was before he got hit by the truck, because that's a very important part in his overall character arc, but we do get that. So I think this is a nice way to start the series, where you just basically just hit us with something huge, like, why is this dude staring at his own dead body? Like, how did he come to be in this situation? And yeah, as soon as they load the body into the ambulance, we get a flashback to 4 hours earlier. We start off at first with a shot of the city where we see a giant sinkhole. And from that giant sinkhole, we see this weird looking insect flying out of it. This is going to play a huge part later on. But then we cut to Yusuke Urameshi, back when he was still alive, on the rooftop of a building smoking a cigarette. And I want to think that the actor who is playing Yusuke has never smoked a cigarette in his life, because the way he's puffing down on this thing looks like an amateur. I mean, I'm not someone who smokes myself, but I've been around others who have smoked. And usually they're not constantly taking drags like every couple seconds, puffing and puffing and puffing and puffing. Usually it's like, you take a drag, you let it flow into your lungs, slowly blow it out. You kind of savor each drag. Over here, Yusuke is just drag after drag after drag after drag. I know I'm just kind of talking about this, but to me, it was kind of hilarious. But eventually, Keiko shows up, and Keiko is Yusuke's childhood friend / kind of love interest, at least in the original source material. Whether that's going to be the part here in this series, I guess we'll find out. But she tells him, like, hey, the teachers need to talk to you. Well, first she badgers him about smoking, and then she tells him the teachers need to talk to him. So he's about to head down the stairs. We see a group of bullies picking on this kid. I say kid, but he's like the same age as them. But basically, they're extorting him for money. And they start like beating him up when Yusuke shows up. And he knocks the leader back, takes the money out of his hand. And that's when a teacher shows up. And the teacher believes that Yusuke is the one that's extorting the students for money. But Yusuke kind of ignores the teacher, hands the money to the bullied kid, and pretty much tells the teacher to F off in not so many words. And he decides that he's done with school for the day. So he decides to play hooky. And this is when he shows up home, and we get to see just the kind of broken lifestyle that he lives, where his mom is a single parent who kind of seems to be very apathetic about life. When we see her, she's just chilling on the couch, smoking a cigarette, watching the news. And we get a little bit of like an info situation here where we see Sakyo is trying to purchase the sinkhole. He's trying to purchase the rights to the sinkhole. And he's like a guy who owns a very famous casino. Anyone who's familiar with the source material will know who Sakyo is. He's going to play a huge part in this series later on. But I was like, okay, this is a nice little way to kind of introduce him and his goal at the moment. But yeah, back to Yusuke. Mom's just chilling out on the couch, smoking a cigarette. She doesn't seem to be surprised that Yusuke has played hooky from school. And she basically tells him, like, hey, go to school if you want to go to school. And if you don't, just drop out because it's hard to pay for your tuition as a single parent. So Yusuke's like, okay, now I feel like I'm getting badgered by my mom. So he decides to go for a walk. And that's when we come across Kuwabara. Kuwabara is another delinquent like Yusuke. Kuwabara sees Yusuke as his rival, and he has made it his goal to fight Yusuke and win. And he hasn't yet. In fact, when we see Kuwabara, we see him just covered in bruises, and he basically says, today's the day I take you down, Yusuke. And Yusuke just beats the ever-loving crap out of him, to the point where even Kuwabara's men are trying to like hold him back and telling him like, it's enough, dude. Like, stop, you're already dead kind of situation. There's our little introduction to Kuwabara. Yusuke eventually decides to go chill out at a ramen stand that's owned by Keiko's family. And along the way, this like ball bounces towards him, and he stops it, and it's this little boy who owns the ball, and he gives it to the little boy. He goes into the stand, starts eating. Eventually, Keiko shows up, and she's upset with Yusuke for like ditching school and all that stuff, as well as just not telling the teacher, like, hey, you weren't extorting those bullies. Like, I know the kind of person you are. You're a good person deep down inside. Why didn't you stand up for yourself? And Yusuke just basically tells her to stay out of it. And then she yells at him and tells him that she wished she would go die. And as this is going down, we see a traffic jam where the insect that flew out of the sinkhole earlier flies into the mouth of one of the drivers of this truck. And as soon as the insect goes inside, he starts like spazzing out, and he just hits the gas and starts plowing through all these cars. And so back with Yusuke, Keiko has just told him to drop dead. He decides to leave the ramen stand, and as he's leaving, he hears a bunch of screams. And he looks down this alleyway, and he just sees the truck plowing through the alleyway, people dodging out of the way. I will say that this scene caused me, like, I don't want to say anxiety, that's too strong of a word, a little bit of unease, just because it looks like the truck was dangerously close to hitting some of these actors and actresses that were dodging out of the way. I'm sure they did it in a way that everyone was safe. I'm just saying that the way it was shot, it looks like this truck comes absolutely close to nailing a couple of these actors and actresses. And there's no CGI here. This is like an actual truck plowing through things with actual people dodging out of the way, sometimes at the last moment. How they were able to pull this off and still keep everything safe, I don't know, but kudos to them because, yeah, this thing looked like it was about to hit a couple of these extras. But eventually, the ball that Yusuke stopped earlier bounces into the road, and the same little boy shows up, and he picks up the ball, and he turns, and he basically stares frozen as Truck-kun is about to plow into him. And Yusuke, he rushes, grabs the boy, and just shoves him out of the way just as the truck runs over Yusuke. And I know some people were kind of like laughing at this scene because this truck just absolutely obliterates Yusuke. At first it plows into him, and then it runs his ass over, and we just see his body like just tumbling before he dies. It's obvious CGI when he gets hits, but I will say that the effects aren't too bad. That's a thing that I've noticed with this episode is that we're going to get CGI for moments, and the CGI is actually pretty good, especially for a Netflix original TV series. I was expecting something more terrible, but CGI effects are pretty damn good. But yeah, that's how Yusuke got killed. I will say that points to Yusuke. Not only does Truck-kun take him out, but Yusuke also takes out Truck-kun. He might be the very first anime protagonist that I've ever seen take out Truck-kun, because the truck ends up tipping over and crashing after it runs over Yusuke. But yeah, unfortunately for Yusuke, he does not get isekai'd. And that's when we get this weird animation. It's kind of hard to explain. It feels almost like still photos, but the still photos are kind of moving. But they're moving so slow that it feels like the scene is stuttering. Like for a moment, I thought that maybe my stream was like having issues, like connection issues. because it feels like it's just like kind of stuttering or buffering. But basically, it's telling the story about how the human world and the demon world were connected. And sometimes humans would wander into the demon world and get attacked, and sometimes demons will just come out onto the human world and start attacking the humans. Basically, it was not good for the humans. Humans were just getting slaughtered by these demons. And so eventually, Enma comes in and he pretty much twists the tunnel connecting the human world to the demon world to a point where it basically blocks the demons from being able to come into the human world and the humans being able to go into the demon world. So the humans get their own world, the demons get their own world. They're not able to go in between the two. And humanity is safe for now. Or at least that's what we assumed to be the case. And yeah, we cut back to where we started with Yusuke just watching his body getting carted out. And that's when we get Botan, who shows up. Kind of excited to see how Botan would be. She's one of my favorite characters in the series. But she basically explains that she's the Shinigami. She's the Grim Reaper. She's death. It's her job to take him to the spirit world where he will be judged. And Yusuke basically kind of tells her to F off in not so many words, but he walks away from her because there's something he's got to do first. And that's when we see the little boy that Yusuke saved, as well as his mom. They're talking to a doctor, and the doctor's explaining that other than a few scrapes and bruises, the kid's going to be completely fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with him. He can even go home. Like, he doesn't have to stay at the hospital. And they ask him, like, how about the student who saved his life? And the doctor kind of, like, sighs because he knows that Yusuke is dead. And we zoom out, and we see Yusuke watching all this. And Yusuke is like, okay, I'm ready to go now. Like, the only reason why he kind of blew off Botan earlier was because he wanted to check up on the little boy and make sure that he was still okay. And he is. And there's a change here from the anime and manga. In the original source material, Yusuke shoves the boy out of the way and gets hit by the car. But he later finds out that he didn't need to do that because the little boy would have been safe anyways, because the car would have just like swerved out of the way at the last possible second. And the boy would have just suffered a couple of bruises, but he would have been fine. I like the fact that they changed that here, where Yusuke's sacrifice wasn't like in vain. It wasn't pointless. Like, he actually did save the boy. If he hadn't have dived in front of the way, the kid would have been killed. So this was a change that I thought was for the better. In the original source material, it's kind of done as a gag, but I don't know. I feel like the way that Yu Yu Hakusho is, it's not necessarily a comedy series. There are comedy bits, but it's not like a gag series. It's not like Konosuba, where Kazuma got killed by a tractor, but he didn't even get hit by the tractor. He just died because he had a heart attack because the tractor coming down at him like scared him to death. Like, that's funny because the overall series is just hilarious and over the top and just comedy. Yu Yu Hakusho is not that. So I didn't really care for the whole his death is kind of a gag. I like the fact that no, his death actually did mean something. So that was a change for the better. Anyways, rambling aside, Botan takes Yusuke to the spirit world, where I will say that I freaking love the design for the spirit world. It has a very like almost painty effect. It almost kind of reminds me of a scene from Tangled. Maybe it also has to deal with the lantern kites. I don't know what they're called, but yeah, I love just the design for this world. I think it looks really, really cool. Botan basically tells him, like, I'm not going to be the one deciding on your soul. In fact, I'm actually going to be taking you to meet my boss. And the boss is Enma, or in this case, Enma's son, Ko-Enma. And we see Ko-Enma, and Ko-Enma is a adult in this live action, at least for this episode. For anyone kind of confused about what I mean by that, that thing that you see in Ko-Enma's mouth is a pacifier. And the reason why is because when we see Ko-Enma, we see him as basically a baby. Maybe toddler would be a better word to use. But yeah, he's basically a toddler with a pacifier in his mouth. And like, I mean, he talks, he walks and stuff like that, but his appearance is that of just like a toddler. And then every once in a while, he can choose a more like grown-up form. But I guess they're kind of cutting back on that comedy aspect. And for this, they just make him as an adult. Maybe we'll see him as a baby in a later episode, but for now, he's just an adult. And we see what he does. And basically, we see scrolls coming out of this pot. And he unravels the scrolls, and we get this kind of cool effect where we basically see everybody's like moments of their lives on this scroll. The very first scroll, we see moments of this guy's life. and we see that throughout his entire life, he was a good person. So Koenma, wraps up the scroll and sends it to this smoky chimney, best way to describe it, to the right, where I'm assuming it goes up into heaven. Meanwhile, the second scroll is just a guy who basically bullied, stole, drank, beat up people. And so Koenma sends the scroll to the left, where it goes into the pits of fire, and I'm assuming it goes to hell. So he basically is in charge of choosing where souls go. And Yusuke arrives, and Koenma, he tells him, I'm going to resurrect you. I'm going to make you be my spirit detective. There's demons escaping into the human world, and I need you to stop it. And in return, I will resurrect you. And Yusuke just kind of stares for a moment. He's like, no thanks. I don't like people telling me what to do. Also, I think people are going to be happy that Yusuke is gone. And then he just walks away. And we just get this funny reaction where Botan and Koenma are just kind of huh? They're just completely shocked that this guy turned down the opportunity to be reborn back into the human world. Yeah, we see Yusuke. He's just chilling out, looking over the city. He happens to be standing on the top of a casino that Sakyo owns. And so that's when we see Sakyo, and he's talking to this guy and the guy is basically helping him buy the property for the sinkhole. And the guy asks him, why are you doing that? Did you, find buried treasure in there or something? There's no benefits to having that sinkhole. And Sakyo says, no, I found something even better, an entrance to the demon world. And then we cut back to Yusuke, where Botan basically tells him, I've brought a lot of souls to the afterlife. One thing that I know, the best way to find out how people truly feel about you is to go attend your wake. So why don't you go do that? Why don't you go to your wake and see how people actually feel about Yusuke being dead? And so Yusuke decides to go and do that. And he realizes that the people he cares for are absolutely devastated. His mom is basically in shock. She's just staring blankly, not even aware of her surroundings. Keiko is there crying, and we even see a moment where the kid that Yusuke saved earlier from being bullied has shown up with money. I guess he's going to give money to Yusuke. I guess it's some kind of Japanese thing where you give money to the deceased. Is this supposed to be some kind of almost like a Greek thing where you pay for the ferryman? Is that what it is? I don't really know, but yeah, he's basically going to bring money, and the bullies that were picking on him earlier show up again. And they basically drag him into this alleyway, and they start picking on him, start hitting him, stealing his money. And that's when Kuwabara shows up and just sucker punches the leader and tells him to knock it off, that this is a wake. He starts yelling at Yusuke's body, how dare you go off and die before we can have our rematch. That's such a sleazy tactic. You should live so that I can fight you again. And his friends have to drag him away. And Yusuke just kind of finds this a bit funny. After everyone's gone, it's just Keiko and Yusuke's mom, and they are just standing over his body, or I should say kneeling over his body, and talking about that this reminds them of the time when Yusuke got sick with a fever. The only time that he's ever been sick in his entire life. And the reason why is because it was winter, and Keiko's hat had gotten blown off her head and landed in a river. And he dove into the cold waters to retrieve her hat, and because of that, he got sick. And the two of them waited at his side until he got better. Keiko starts crying because she believes this is her fault, because the very last words that she ever said to Yusuke was that he should go drop dead. And so she believes that she basically brought this upon him. And as they're crying and counseling each other, Yusuke is just watching all this. Meanwhile, the bullies have tracked down the bullied kid and start beating the crap out of him. And things go way too far, to the point where the leader of the bullies pulls out a lighter and he's going to burn this kid alive. And of course, the kid's freaking out, saying he doesn't deserve this. And the insect that we saw earlier arrives and goes inside the kid's ear, and the kid starts transforming into a demon. But right now, it's just he just kind of starts spazzing out, and he just starts throwing these bullies around. Eventually, he stumbles over this motorcycle, which causes the fuel tank to leak out, and it causes an explosion, and all the houses nearby start lighting up on fire. And Kuwabara, he hears this commotion, and he rushes over to see what's going on, and he just sees this bullied kid freaking out while there's a bunch of fire going on. And then the bullied kid starts attacking Kurabara. And so we get just a fight scene where Kurabara and his friends are trying to fight this kid and just getting beaten up. And so we cut to Keiko, and Keiko is dreaming of Yusuke. She's back at her house, and she's like crying in her sleep. And Yusuke like wipes a tear from her eye, and she wakes up, and she seems to like feel Yusuke's presence. So she rushes out to go back to see Yusuke's body. And Yusuke watches her run away, and then he asks Botan, like, okay, so to be resurrected, what do I need to do? And we cut to Yusuke's house where his mom is just, once again, just still hovering over his body. She starts rubbing his face and stuff, and then she starts freaking out because his skin is warm. And then she even feels that he has a heartbeat. And as that happens, we cut to Yusuke where Koenma tells him, okay, your first mission, you got to track down this demon and stop it. It's on a rampage right now, and your house could be in danger. And that's when we see Keiko show up, and Yusuke's house is burning down. Yusuke's mom is being pulled out by some neighbors, and she's freaking out, screaming that Yusuke is alive, that she felt his warmth and felt his heartbeat. And Keiko rushes into the burning house and starts trying to pull his body out. And Yusuke is like yelling at her, like, get the hell out of here, leave my body be, just go save yourself. The house starts collapsing, and it's about to fall on her when he uses his spiritual powers to hold it up. And basically he's begging like Koenma, like, whatever I gotta do to save Keiko, just let me save her. And Koenma's like, all right. So Koenma puts Yusuke's spirit into his body, and Yusuke grabs Keiko's, and he rushes out, gives Keiko to his mom, tells him like, hey, I'll be back and explain things later. And then he runs to confront the possessed demon boy. And this is a lot different than in the original source material. In the original source material, there's a lot that's been cut out. So rather than just allowing Yusuke to be resurrected, Yusuke has to do this task first. And his task is that he's given this egg, and he basically has to protect the egg. And the egg's going to hatch. Basically, Yusuke has to like feed the egg its spirit energy, I believe. It's been a long time since I've watched the anime or read the source material, so correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, the egg is going to be like an essence of what his spirit energy is like. If his spirit energy is negative, the egg's going to hatch into a beast and devour him. But if the spirit energy is pure, then he will be granted the ability to be resurrected. And Keiko rushes into the fire, and she's trying to pull Yusuke out, and the building starts collapsing around her. And so Yusuke uses the egg, and he throws the egg, and the egg sends out like bursts of energy that creates a exit for Keiko to be able to leave. Like it doesn't get rid of the fire, but it allows the fire to leave enough so that there's an exit way. But she's too weak to get out. So Kurabara actually is the one that shows up, and he rushes in, he grabs Keiko and Yusuke, and he pulls them out. So Kurabara is the one that saves Yusuke, as well as the fact that Yusuke sacrificed himself by throwing the egg. That he sacrificed his one opportunity to be resurrected. So they got rid of all that whole egg aspect, as well as Kurabara being the one to save the day. And I don't know. I know some people are kind of upset about that because they feel like that kind of defeats Kurabara's character arc. And I do kind of agree with them on that aspect. It looks like we're seeing more of his character arc through witnessing his friends being attacked by this demon and not being able to do anything about it. I guess we'll see how it happens, how that plays out in the next episode. But yeah, Kurabara is actually the one that's supposed to save the day. Kind of a wasted opportunity to show some of Kurabara's character growth, but it looks like they might be going a different direction with him in that regards, and I guess we'll see what happens in episode 2. At this point in time, Kurabara's men are they're done. They've taken so many poundings. They've been bashed. One of them is like on fire, and Kurabara is like trying to put him out. And the demon-possessed boy grabs the pipe, hits Kurabara in the face, and is about to hit him again when Yusuke does a diving kick and tells Kurabara, hey, go save your men, I got this. And then he chases after the possessed demon kid. And then we just get like a really long fight scene between the two. And I'll say that I like this fight scene. I thought it was really good, mostly because they don't rely on CGI too much. In fact, they do a lot of practical effects and a lot of, well, I don't want to say a lot, but they do practical effects and wire work. And I've always been a huge fan of movies, TV shows where they go with practical effects first and then use CGI to kind of just supplement that. Rather than the opposite, which we see in a lot of modern movies where everything is CGI, and use practical effects when you can. Practical effects always look better than CGI. It always stands the test of time. And yeah, this fight scene is just, I like it. It's pretty much just back and forth with Yusuke fighting this demon-possessed kid who slowly starts morphing more and more into a demon to the point where Kurama tells him, like, hey, you got to stop him soon. Otherwise, once he fully turns, there's no saving him. We even have a moment where Yusuke pulls a Yakuza, where he grabs a bicycle and starts using the bicycle as a weapon. And he tells the possessed kid, like, hey, you got to fight this. You know, you have the strength. I saw you standing up to the bullies earlier at my wake. You have the strength to fight back. I need you to do that now. And the kid temporarily reverts back long enough to beg Yusuke for help before the demon overtakes him again. And this seems to drive Yusuke. He knocks the demon kid to the ground and powers up his fist. And we just see him gathering spirit energy. Like unconsciously, he's doing it. And he punches the kid in the face and basically punches the demon out of him. And he grabs the demon and squeezes until it dies. And the kid's now okay. He's like reverting back to normal, but he's unconscious. And so Yusuke lifts him up and carries him away. He walks past Kuwabara and basically tells Kuwabara, like, tend to your men. I'll take care of this kid. And Kuwabara, like, just barely sees him through his blurry vision. We cut to the next day where we see Keiko and Yusuke's mom at the ramen stand. And Yusuke shows up. And everyone's, like, surprised because they couldn't believe. They didn't know if it was, like, a dream or not. Like, is he really back? I mean, this kid was dead for a while, and now he's here, alive and standing. And, yeah, they ask him, like, you know, like, you're here. And he's like, and Yusuke tells Keiko, yeah, I'm not going to die just because you talk shit. And I was like, okay, that's pure Urameshi right there. But yeah, his mom comes in and basically pulls the two of them into a huge group hug. And Yusuke is kind of telling them, like, to back off. But you can tell that he actually enjoys it. Meanwhile, Kurama and Botan are watching this from the spirit world. And Botan's like, you know, he did a great job. And Kurama is like, I don't know. Like, if that's the best that he can do, we're going to be in some serious trouble. Especially since there are some demons out that are stealing 3 precious artifacts. And that's when we cut to a shipyard where we see these demons attacking a bunch of armed guards. And as this huge chaos battle is going down, we see Kurama, Hiei, and Gouki. And I will say that Hiei looks pretty cool. Kurama looks cool. But his hair just looks kind of off. I don't know if it's like a wig or not. Everything up until this point was kind of seemed realistic. I mean, as realistic as you can get with demons and spirit worlds and, you know, stuff like that. But as soon as Hiei and Kurama show up, they basically kind of feel like two people, like 2 cosplayers who just left an anime convention. Like, they really stand out. It reminds me very much of that meme where you see like an anime classroom and then it says, guess which one's the main character? And it's obvious who the main character is because he completely stands out from the rest of the classmates. That's kind of what Kurama and Hiei look to me. Like, they really just stand out from everybody else. But yeah, Gouki's CGI is actually not too bad. Especially like when I compare it to like modern Marvel and stuff. Gouki almost kind of has like this Incredible Hulk look to him. But I would say that he looks a lot better than the Incredible Hulk that we saw in like She-Hulk, for example. So once again, pleasantly surprised by the CGI. It's obvious CGI, but it's still like really, really good. Like above what I was expecting it to be. And better than a lot of other things I've seen. But yeah, the 3 of them basically start fighting off the demons and they steal the 3 items. Which is the Conjuring Blade, the Mirror... Is it Mirror of Darkness? I can't remember what it's called, but it's the Mirror and the Soul Orb. It's basically 3 very powerful artifacts, and they've now been stolen by 3 demons. And that's how the episode ends. So I really love this episode. I thought it was really good. They've had to change things around, obviously, but I feel like it still maintains the essence of Yu Yu Hakusho. It still retains that personality. They're not like completely changing things. Like you don't have gender swaps, you don't have race swaps like you see in a lot of Western media. The changes that they made is because they're condensing a lot of material into an episode. And assuming we're going to be getting a lot of that because we're only getting 5 episodes, unless hopefully there's a season 2. But we're only getting 5 episodes, so to condense Yu Yu Hakusho to 5 episodes, you got to cut out a lot of things. You got to condense and kind of change things around. So they've had to do that, but I feel like it's fine. Like the flow of this episode was great in my opinion. There was no moments where it's like, okay, we have too much happening at once, or we don't have enough happening. I think things flowed really well. I think the story structure is really good. The characters feel like the characters from the original source material. I think the actors did an amazing job with their parts. I am watching this on the original Japanese audio. I know, like, I read that some people who watched it with the English dub, they said that the dub wasn't too great, and it kind of made everything a little bit more laughable. I don't know, because I'm watching this with the Japanese audio, and I think the actors are, like, really nailing their parts so far. I guess we'll see with future episodes if it continues, but I don't really have much complaints about this episode. I think the practical effects were cool. The fight scenes were cool. Like I said, the story flow was really good. Characters are, they matched their source material and they all make sense and they were acted well. Yeah, I got like no complaints. I think this was awesome. I absolutely love this episode. And if the rest of the episodes are going to be like this, then I think this series is going to be freaking fantastic. Freaking awesome episode. Really, really great start. Based off just this episode alone, I would recommend it. But you tell me what you think. You enjoyed it? You didn't? But there you go. There's the first episode of Yu Yu Hakusho. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Later.